the states should be leading by example, saying, hey, look what we can get done when we not only have the populace on our side, but now we have the folks in office who can actually make this reality happen. It just seems almost backwards of what you're experiencing versus what you should be seeing happen.
Yeah, the biggest problem is informing the voters, right? The average voter doesn't read independent journalism or read MyRag or read a lot of these other, or is on Twitter, right? The average voter, is seeing what they see on Fox News. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is the best thing for Texas since sliced bread. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's amazing. And we just need to keep voting for these guys because Texas is just doing a phenomenal job. So the average voter believes that because that's what the mainstream is pushing out. And so when they go to the ballot box, they skip the primary, so they don't vote in the primary, right? Which is hurting us, in as far as getting better conservatives. And if they do vote in the primary, they vote for the incumbent. I think in Texas, at least, incumbents win over 90% of the time.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on another fun-filled episode, of the Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered, by Cardio Miracle, the best heart health supplement in the world. So if you want to learn more about how to lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym, stick around. We're going to talk about that more in today's episode. But first, we're heading to this, down towards the south there, towards the border to the Lone Star State. We're talking all things Texas. And with that, we're going to dig into, is there a current revolt? That's a pun you'll see as I bring on today's guest, Tony Ortiz from Current Revolt. Tony, welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on, man. I know we talked before we hit the record button. Lots of things are happening down in the Lone Star State in the great state of Texas. But before we do that, do us a favor, Tony. Introduce yourself here to the audience. And what is Current Revolt?
Yeah, Current Revolt is something started back in 2020. We're a media organization that initially started off as just producing commentary on political happenings that were happening in Texas. And we've kind of evolved into a sort of quasi TMZ of Texas politics. We talk a lot about the affairs that are going on, the different drama, scandals that are involving politics. And we talk about a lot of things that are kind of in the dirt and the weeds that the mainstream media isn't really comfortable talking about. So there's a vacuum for it. There's people that read it, and we provide that.
Why do you think the mainstream media is not focusing on all those dirty, juicy details?
It's funny you bring that up. I just, right before this, we're doing this, I got off the phone with a mainstream journalist. There is something I just tweeted on. There is a big scandal going on involving a former Republican conservative operative that got arrested for multiple charges of rape, sexual assault, and family violence. And now this journalist I spoke to is a lefty journalist or a progressive journalist, and she was telling me that their mainstream media outlet plus another competing leftist progressive mainstream media outlet is not covering this story, which is very interesting. You'd think they'd be jumping on the gun to publish a story about a GOP or Republican conservative operative committing or being alleged to have commit multiple instances of sexual assault, but they're not. And she didn't have a good answer as to why. A lot of it was just like, oh, there's not enough interest in this, or like we don't want to platform this sort of stuff, and it just sounds like nonsense to me. So of course we're covering it. We were the first to publish the police complaints, right? So you can read that on my website or on my Twitter account right now. We'll publish it on the website later. But I think that to answer your question, I think that mainstream outlets are more concerned with covering very digestible news and also stuff that they don't view as like super controversial, and we're more willing to get into the weeds and cover breaking stuff.
And let's talk about that. Why the focus on the controversial, the dramatic, all that? I guess what the big media entities probably say is like, that's beneath us, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that make us unique and help us, and where we fill a vacuum of news here in Texas. We don't talk about anything that isn't related to Texas. So it has to have some sort of connection or relation or happening in Texas. So, for example, if President Trump were to resign tomorrow, we wouldn't write it up. It wouldn't affect us. So it's not Texas related. I guess you can make an argument that it is, but in a way it's not. So we wouldn't write it up, right? And so people who read us, they can pull up our website and they can know that whatever they're reading, it's 100% going to be relevant to a Texan. And two, people read drama. TMZ is one of the most popular websites, whether people want to admit it or not, in the United States. Men and women alike read it, right? They love hearing about gossip and who's sleeping with who and who's been seen where and what they're doing. There's a desire for that news, and nobody in Texas wants to produce it. So we do.
So 2020 was when Current Revolt started. What was really the genesis for having Current Revolt become the TMZ of Texas?
Yeah, so I've been in politics. I've been involved in politics since 2016. I worked on the Trump 2016 election race. And in 2020, as you all know, there was a big, I don't even know if you're going to get censored if I say the word, so I'm not going to say it, but everybody knows what happened in 2020. The algorithm affects it if you say certain words, I'm aware.
Sure
so
does. Don't worry. We've had to deal with that with YouTube during COVID ourselves for all the, the
we all know what
misinformation.
happened we all know what happened in 2020. And so that was a trigger for us to start writing opinion pieces, kind of just out of frustration. The state was relatively locked down. We didn't do too bad here in Texas, but it was relatively locked down. And me and a bunch of guys were frustrated with the lockdowns and what was going on politically. And, you had a bunch of Republicans and conservatives that were arresting other conservatives. Shelley Luther was a conservative that's now elected that got thrown in jail over policies that our governor, Greg Abbott, had in place. And so we were frustrated with all that. So we started writing. And then eventually we broke the news on a story where a state representative, a Republican state representative, was having an extramarital affair with another Republican state representative. We broke that story. And people started criticizing us and saying, "Oh, you guys are a trash rag. You guys publish gossip and garbage, and you guys are like a TMZ." And I'm like, yeah, you know what? We are. Like, sure. Okay. I'll be that guy. Like, I don't care. And so we leaned into it very, very hard. And we've been incredibly successful ever since.
So I grew up in New York State. I lived in Pennsylvania for just shy of a decade, and then I moved out here to Indiana. So obviously one of these things is not like the others. And Indiana is a very, very bright red state. It was for a long time surrounded by a lot of blue states, but it really became kind of like the beacon of Republican hope out there in the Midwest, in the Eastern Midwest. And when I moved out to Indiana, I got to see a complete discrepancy compared to what I grew up experiencing, which in New York and in Philadelphia, for just the microcosm when I lived there, it was just deep, deep, deep blue, right? It was as Democrat as it could possibly get. And then going to Indiana, I saw it was deep red. But with that being said, I had a lot of folks more in the small L, even some big L libertarian ethics, and heck, even some Republicans here in the state where I live. I'm in more of a rural area, rural community. And I heard a lot of Republicans who were saying, hey, the Republican administration, and when I moved here, it was Governor Holcomb. Now it's Governor Braun. Lots of folks with some very deep-seated issues. And it was a little alien to me, right? Because I grew up where it was Republicans against the entire state, basically, right? So I say that because I look at Texas, and when your average person hears Texas, they think of, big red Texas down in the southern United States. God, you guys, the rumor was back in the 2020s, you were going to become your own country with a whole Texit movement, which I want to get into some of your perspectives there. But based on the feedback, just in the limited time you and I have talked off air, and then the time we've been connecting here in the show, it sounds like, keep me honest here, but like, is Texas not exactly the GOP, conservative, libertarian, liberty-oriented bastion of hope that the rest of America seems to think it is?
Yeah, we're not.
Okay.
To be the short of it, we are very conservative. We're just not the shining star example that many people think we are. For example, we just got, the right to carry, concealed carry, just like 3 years ago. Wow. Which you would think, like, the stereotype cowboys, horses, guns, all that good stuff. Like, you think that we had constitutional carry for like ever. We didn't. You had to have a license to carry everywhere. Now wow. You don't. But this was only 3 years ago, right? We have a lot of problems, right? And people, people stereotype us as being super conservative, and we're just not. Not every Republican is as conservative as they profess themselves to be, or that they could be. And my rag spends a lot of time attacking those Republicans for not being as conservative as they can be. And we get a lot of criticisms like, why do you guys swing right so much? Why do you guys punch right so much? And I've always explained it like this. If, for example, if you lived in California and you're complaining about Republicans ruining your state, you're not, you don't make sense, right? Because California is run by Democrats, right? And so the opposite is true here in Texas. If you're in Texas and you're complaining about the way things are done, or you're not happy with policies or legislation, there's a 90% chance that it's a Republican's fault. As long as you don't live in a major metropolitan area, it's a Republican's fault. So yeah, we swing right a lot, and it's just because Republicans aren't doing the best job they could.
Why aren't they? I mean, you have a super majority in Texas. You think it'd be easy to get forth like some real bedrock conservative solutions and principles and policy in place, no?
Yeah, there's like an infinite reasons why they don't do a great job. The easiest one is that they're just not, they don't believe in really what they're saying, or they're just not as conservative as they portray themselves to be. They're more moderates, right? Which is understandable. The other one is like, these guys always need something to run on, right? We're like on our fifth session in a row where we're banning abortion. We're banning abortion again, by the way. We've already banned it, but we're doing it again, by the way.
Nice.
We also
Congrats.
are banning sanctuary cities again for like the 20th time. We've already banned them before, but we're doing it again, right? So if you're running for office, you need something to run off of, right? So there is this motivation, and this is me just theorizing. There's this motivation to not get everything 100% done. Maybe it's even better to get 10% done, because then you can say, hey, I'm Tony. I got constitutional carry done, but like we didn't get this, and this done because we ran out of time, or because this Democrat got in the way. So you need to vote for me again. You need to put me back in office again so I can get A, B, and C done now. And then you get me again in there, and I maybe halfway get one thing done. And then I'm like, oh, you need to vote for me again, right? So there is this slight motivation to just, for lack of a better word, half-ass everything, because you need something to run on again.
Listening to Tony talk about Texas politicians and all the half-measure promises they make, they say they're going to deliver the world, and they actually deliver diddly squat. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of heart health supplements. The flashy labels, the big claims, and then nothing. Just like banning sanctuary cities for the 10th time, it's all sizzle, no steak. And that is why I've been using Cardio Miracle for the past 2 years, because, surprise, surprise, it actually does what it says it's going to do. And what it's going to do is lower your blood pressure, improve your circulation, give you more energy, plus a serious pump at the gym. No political theater, just results. So, if you're sick of trusting systems, be it politicians or junk supplement companies that keep falling short, just do what I did. Take your health into your own hands. And you do that by scanning the little QR code over my shoulder, or head to cardiomiracle.com and use code TBNS at checkout for 15% off your order. Again, that's code TBNS for 15% off, because your heart deserves better than political BS and placebo powders. Which is unfortunate, right? Because when you look at where we are right now as a country, I would say that the momentum is more on the right side of the aisle. And I was actually having a good conversation with one of my really close buddies here who was saying, like, Nichols, did you take a big jump off a short pier? And I was like, in what regards? And he goes, well, it just seems like, you've been much more in favor with the right wing lately. And I'm like, dude, I'm a libertarian who understands that our ideal voter persona is going to be folks more politically on the left, be that their politics, their personality, their moral preferences, whatever that may be. They're going to be more on the political right. And I don't think that's silly to, say that's the reality. I know a lot of folks in the libertarian movement, especially, they want it to be, the leftist hoity-toity highbrow person that is actually our voter. That's not the case. So with that being said, I would say when you look at where we are right now as a country, I think the only demographic that leaned more into the Democrats this past election cycle were folks over the age of 70. Everybody else went more towards the right. So I would say right now, you guys of all the states should be leading by example, saying, hey, look what we can get done when we not only have the populace on our side, but now we have the folks in office who can actually make this reality happen. It just seems almost backwards of what you're experiencing versus what you should be seeing happen.
Yeah, the biggest problem is informing the voters, right? The average voter doesn't read independent journalism or read MyRag or read a lot of these other, or is on Twitter, right? The average voter, is seeing what they see on Fox News. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is the best thing for Texas since sliced bread. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's amazing. And we just need to keep voting for these guys because Texas is just doing a phenomenal job. So the average voter believes that, because that's what the mainstream is pushing out. And so when they go to the ballot box, they skip the primary, so they don't vote in the primary, right? Which is this is hurting us, and as far as getting better conservatives. And if they do vote in the primary, they vote for the incumbent. I think in Texas, at least, incumbents win over 90% of the time.
Which, by the way, Tony, that is a nationwide issue. Let's point that out. That's a nationwide issue.
Doesn't surprise me. Me. So, the incumbents get back in, and then now we're at the general election time, and I'm Fox News voter number 28, and I go to the ballot box, and I'm like, yeah, things are great. Sure, check it off, right? And then I go back to my 9 to 5, right? People don't have time to talk about and digest politics like you and I do, because we do this for like a living or for a hobby or for fun or because we enjoy it, like some of the other people in our industry, right? But the average person doesn't give a crap. They're dealing with their 9 to 5 job. They're dealing with their 3 kids. They're trying to pay their mortgage and make a living and put food on the table. They don't have time to consume all this. So, yeah, they just get by with voting for status quo. And you know what? I mean, in Texas, status quo isn't as bad as being left, at least.
So what have you found beyond, I mean, and let's just maybe take a step away from Current Revolt. I'm just curious, for you personally, what's been the best way to actually meet voters where they are and get them to do things differently, like to actually go and pay attention to the politics of their area or their locality, to say, hey, don't sit out on the primary, get involved? Have you found that one type of approach works better than the others?
Yeah, so some things, I mean, if you're trying to reach voters, like for example, families, stuff that affects their children is very big, right? And so those are like city council and school board races. You may not get your local dad or mom to care about like their state rep race, but if their child is going to school and their tax dollars are paying for basically light pornography for their kids to learn about being trans in schools, that's getting mom and dad fired up to like go to their city council meetings, their school board meetings, and to go vote. And so I have found that when you're trying to get voters involved, especially like right-wing voters or voters and families, the best thing to do is to show them news that's related to stuff that's hitting them immediately. And that is their tax dollars funding whatever program or whatever thing that their children are consuming. And so that's really important to them. If you talk to them about stuff like, oh, they want to change the way we process lawsuits and defamation suits and who pays the results of those suits, like that's a big deal. Of course, that's a huge deal. But does mom and dad care about that? No. But if you tell them like, oh, hey, Timmy's going to school and his teacher with blue and pink hair is talking about his sexuality and how he wants to be a woman, and having them read a comic book where they talk about being trans, like, yeah, mom and dad are fired up now all of a sudden. So you have to talk about things that voters care about, instead of just dropping slop on them that's really not important.
Wow, it's almost like that's the slogan of my show: meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. How about that?
Exactly.
But and man, at the end of the day, you're spot on, because I just had this debate with with 2 folks, Abdullah Hayek and Kyle Moran, here in the show. One conversation was about U.S. funding in the Middle East. The other was about funding in Eastern Europe with the Ukrainian and Russian war. And in both of those debates, I just had to keep on hammering home the point. Guys, like, listen, I hear your argument. I know you're making the most sound argument you possibly can. Your average person will not care when they're comparing and contrasting what you're presenting and then saying, hey, I'm seeing the potholes on the road. I'm seeing the blue-haired lady trying to teach borderline pornography to my children at school. Like, and by the way, when COVID happened, I'm seeing you do that while I'm forced to have my kids stay at home because the teachers union is too afraid to go back to school. What? Like, and this is the stuff, you're spot on. It's the stuff that people can see, touch, taste, smell, hear. Like, stop with the hoity-toity, like, pie in the sky stuff. Let's talk about the stuff that actually, again, meets the person that we're talking to where they are on the issues that are resonating to them in their everyday life. And man, I'm so glad you hit on that, because that is exactly the focus of the show. And by the way, what we see work when folks are actually going out and trying to change hearts and minds. So thank you for that, Tony. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this international stuff is such BS. Like, nobody
Really
cares. Anybody, the only people who care about what's happening in Ukraine or Russia are the people that are ultra obsessed with politics, or they have loyalty to a foreign country. And I mean, your person that like I'm Hispanic, for example. I've never lived or I visited Mexico, I think once or twice in my life. I don't even speak Spanish, okay? But I have no loyalty to Mexico. But you've got people that are my skin color, that are Hispanic, that they don't have loyalty to the United States. Their loyalty relies back south in the country of Mexico, okay? And there's plenty of people in our state or in our country that have voting rights, that still have loyalty to foreign nations. And these are nations that are either friendly or not friendly to us. And so they're ultra obsessed with what's going on in Ukraine, in Syria, in Israel, in Mexico, right? And it just, I don't care. I don't have loyalty to these countries. So if you tell me like, hey, we're going to save 1.6 billion by reducing funding to Ukraine. I'm like, great. How do we invest that in Americans, right? How do we invest that in our people? And, there's the big brain argument, like, yeah, what happens in Russia and Ukraine eventually affects the U.S. citizens. Of course, nobody is dumb enough not to believe that. But the average voter that we've been talking to, the average person, they don't care about this stuff. They want to know that they can put food on the table and they can work a 9 to 5 and provide for their family.
So let's go back to COVID, because during COVID, there was a conversation I had in the show with a gentleman named Dennis Miller. He's from the Texit movement. And actually, I think Dennis has been on the show twice. Is he on twice? He was on twice. Okay. I guess there you go. And I found out, I was like, oh, I heard this conversation. You were on Timcast with Dennis Miller. And, this whole Texit movement, right? It was the idea that during COVID, things were getting so bad that a lot of states were starting to say, hey, do we want to be part of this whole movement going forward of one united 50 states of America? And maybe we should start to consider alternatives, right? And this is where the whole Texit movement came from. So I had Dennis on the show, and it sounded like when he was on the show that, we're like a couple months away from Texas being not just the Lone Star state, the Lone Star country. And, fast forward to 2025, it's been like 2 or 3 years since Dennis was on the show, and I don't see that. So talk to me. What's going on in Texas? Are you guys going to become, the first state to secede from the union and become your own little country, or is that just not the case?
Yeah, short answer is no. It's never going to happen. Not in a million years. I would put my entire life savings and my wife's life savings and my future kids' life savings on this. It's never, ever, ever going to happen, no matter how much people want it. It's not going to happen, okay? Texit is not going to happen. The idea that Texit, so the idea of Texas sounds really cool. And I say this as a Texan. I've been in Texas since 2004. So I didn't grow up in Texas, but I did spend a lot of time here early on. But I've been here since at least 2004. And as a Texan, Texit and Texas nationalism and Texas independence sounds so freaking cool. Like, we're our own country, right? Guns, like nobody can tell us what to do. Like, don't mess with the Lone Star State. All of that is like the stereotype that Texans carry, right? You walk into a local Walmart here in Texas, and you'll see the flag everywhere. And so, like, there's a lot of Texas pride. So with that comes this idea of Texas independence. Unfortunately, economically, socially, politically, it makes zero sense, and it will never happen for a multitude of reasons. The biggest factor being that the majority of voting Texans do not support Texas. Okay, they just don't.
Really?
And no, they don't. And that includes Democrats. Unfortunately, Democrats are real, so you have to include them in this voting block. Democrats overwhelmingly do not want Texit. And I would say less than half of Republicans actually do want Texit. A lot less than half. And that is based off of real voting efforts and real voting polls, not polls that Texit has done or friends of Texit has done, right? And so I think that there's 2 categories, or really 3 categories, of people that believe that Texas independence is a real thing. There's the people that just think it's a cool thing and it should happen because it's cool and it's awesome and it's fun and because we deserve it, because we're good. We're Texans. So there's those people, and I think they're not at fault for it because it is cool. It sounds fun. There's the people that truly believe it'll happen and want to push for it, and they're not being paid. They just actually totally are all aboard on it. They think that they've got this down, right? And then there's the people that are leading these movements, and I'm not saying this about Dennis, but I'm saying that there's groups of people that lead these types of things, that control these narratives and push these ideas, and they're using it to fundraise. They're using it to make money. They're using it to grift. And you can see that if you go to any of these Texas nationalist social media and look at their YouTube pages, they'll put out these mailers and all this stuff to show up to their YouTube channels for these live shows, and they'll get like 900 views for the state of Texas for like one of the most popular things, like 900 views on a weekend or on a weekday even. And it's like, it's not a real thing. Okay. And again, it sounds cool, and I don't fault people for wanting it, but it's just such a waste of time. There's a lot bigger things that we should focus on, and I just think Texit is not it.
So what are some of those other bigger things right now? I mean, right now we're recording here just for posterity's sake in April of 25. What are some of those big, I mean, like headline leading issues in Texas that you guys are talking about? I mean, are these things that, I don't want to say they go beyond Texas, but do you see things that are like a theme that Texas is going through that maybe the rest of the United States is also going through?
Yeah, I mean, with us, there's a few big things. Like, right, we have a lot of energy issues. So we're a lot of this
Mm,
about energy, right? Energy, and we have our own grid, and it almost failed a while back. So like energy
that's
and
right.
how we manage it is it's a very very big deal, right? Water is a huge deal for our state. It's something that's going to be an issue in the future, and a lot of people aren't thinking about it. Securing the border is always an issue. It's gotten a lot better under President Trump, of course. But these politicians are never fully on board with really securing the border, right? E-Verify is something that I think is really important for the future of Americans being able to secure well-paying jobs. A lot of a lot of companies don't use it, and you have a lot of. I mean, you go. I always crack up. I get in these debates with my friends. They're always like, "Oh, you need to go to this XYZ Asian restaurant because it's super authentic." And so we go, and I look in the kitchen, and there's a guy that looks like me in there cooking. Like there's a Jose in the back cooking, right? So it's like, yeah, this shirt's authentic, but you got dudes like me running it. It doesn't matter which ethnic restaurant it is. There's people like me in the back cooking. So it's like, whatever. Like, okay, is it really that authentic? Like, okay, sure, whatever. But anyway, you have a lot of illegals that work in the industries here, and they're not using E-Verify. And these Republicans, and this is something that we're writing on, and I think we'll have an article on it tomorrow. They have this scam out where they're trying to pass a bill to force E-Verify. And as a politician, I could tell you, hey man, we're going to pass E-Verify, and we're going to force businesses to use it. And you're like, man, that sounds freaking awesome. Let's do it. And then you don't read, you just vote for me. The bill passes, and I say, you know what? Yeah, I got it done. We put out E-Verify. It's in the books, and the law passed. Well, then you don't read the fine print. And the fine print in these bills that they're pushing out is that they're requiring E-Verify for only government jobs.
Hmm.
Okay, I assure you, Jose is not applying to be, the secretary at the local city council. Okay, Maria is not applying to be the admin assistant for the treasury department for the local city. Okay, Maria and Jose are working jobs like manual labor jobs and other types jobs that are not related to the city. So they pass this. They're trying to push this E-Verify thing on them and not telling the full story. They're going to pass it. They're going to view it as a win, but it's not going to do anything. It's going to affect maybe 2% of the illegal population. It does nothing. So that's the kind of scams that these Republicans out here pull, is where they say one thing and then you read the fine print and something completely else. So these are major problems, right? And these are things that we should be talking about rather than like Texas independence, because that's just not going to happen.
You used your example of the E-Verify. Just made me remember one of my favorite lines from Everybody Loves Raymond. What did the Mexican firefighter name his two sons? Jose and Jose. so
Gotcha.
bad. Sorry. That was Peter Boyle, by the way, one of my favorite actors from the golden era of film. But anyways, I digress. Yeah. So as we're going towards the tail end of the show, Tony, I wanted to just segue a little bit more towards like where we're heading, not just as, in your case, Texans, but as a country, right? Because right now I would dare say we are one of one of those, like those forks in the road, right? Like everybody was saying, oh, 2016 is the fork in the road. Well, was it 2020 fork in the road? I don't know. I think 2024 is really the ultimate fork in the road. And I guess, where do you see the country going? Is Texas going to be one of those states that's leading by example? Are we going to see other states, you think, kind of lead and Texas follows suit? I'm curious what your thoughts are, being a native, well, not native Texan, but being there for over 21 years, right? Like, just kind of give us what your vibes are, and where do you think this leads us as a state in your world, but also as a country?
As a state, we're doing better. It's not great. It's not bad. But it's not. It's not bad. It's not horrible. So as a state, we continue to do better. This session so far has been decent. You'll have, there is a group of people in Texas that are constantly complaining about how the state's doing, like by aggressively, right? And there's, of course, some of what they're saying is valid, but you need people to push the Overton window. So you need those people, you need those groups that are just never happy. They're always pushing highly aggressively. This sucks. Everything's bad. The Texas is on fire. We need to do better. We need to primary everybody. You need those people, right? And then you've got the left that's pushing their own way. But things aren't going that bad in Texas. They're not great, not going that bad. As far as like the rest of the country, I think Trump has like inspired a lot of Republicans and a lot of conservatives and a lot of people to start running more aggressively conservative. And I think that is a good thing. We'll see some definite positive things come from that as conservatives, right? And in a fiscal thing, you mentioned you're a libertarian. I find that libertarians are phenomenal in city government, because in city government, there's not a lot of culture to manage. It's all money of taxes, fiscal stuff, spending. That stuff that's like insanely important. You have to be very smart to manage. You have to be very responsible, very conservative. You have to be you have to feel bad about spending people's money. You have to be able to justify it. And I think libertarians handle that phenomenally. I would disagree on other positions in government, but in city government, libertarians are phenomenal. And so I think the Trump administration and getting elected has inspired a lot of people to run. The unfortunate part is just the economy. It's bad. There's a housing crisis, right? Inflation's out of control. We're looking at potential stagflation. Everybody's got some kind of doomer vibes to them about spending, and I think consumer trust and spending is down, if I recall correctly. I'm not an economist, but I feel that personally, like people are afraid to go out. I think even people visiting our country, like tourists here is down year over year. So I think from an economic standpoint, there's a lot of concern, and people are afraid.
You mentioned there's some issues you have with libertarians. Trust me too. I identify as a small L, very, very small L libertarian, because at the end of the day, it's funny you say this, because I was literally just having this this conversation. I'll call it a debate a little bit with one of my very close friends. And I'm like, dude, listen, at the end of the day, I don't care what party it is. A party is nothing more than a vessel to get ideas or policies into action, right? Or to use it as a platform to message to a larger audience. That's it. Yeah. I look at the Libertarian Party. I mean, it's been a dumpster fire for 40 plus years, and I don't see that getting better anytime soon. However, I do think it has a role in helping maybe push the certain parties to be better on very important key issues. You mentioned economics, right? Like, hey, if I can have a libertarian running against a Republican and saying, hey, I'm going to run as a libertarian to keep you honest, right? I don't want you to run to the middle or to the left on economics. I'm going to hold you accountable. And actually, we had this here in my home state. I say home state, where I live now in Indiana. We had Don Rainwater running for governor, and his entire role was to try and hold Mike Braun, who was a U.S. senator who was running for governor, to hold him to be more accountable. So I say all that. I definitely hear, there are a lot of libertarians who make both the folks on the left and the right and raise their eyebrows and say, really, guys? I'm right there with you in a lot of different areas. But looking at how do we move forward as a country, I do see what you're outlining as the issues you're seeing in Texas be issues that we're seeing across the board in other states. And I guess at the end of the day, the one thing that we have talked about today that does give me hope for the future across the board is that people are having conversations like this right now, but in mass. Now, they might not be sitting down and watching the evening news, to your point, for, in hyper detail, or reading that economics paper or reading that foreign policy brief, but they're paying attention, right? They're aware, and they're having side conversations. They're listening to Joe Rogan and hearing different perspectives that weren't allowed before, right? And I think that's a win. Culturally speaking, we're having conversations right now that we would never have 5, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, heck, man, like go back to when you guys were started in 2020, try to talk about the COVID pandemic and any common sense type of perspective, and you were instantly throttled or outright banned on social media or on these larger platforms like YouTube and the likes. So to see where we are today, the Overton window has absolutely shifted. I think that's a step in the right direction. Now, that doesn't mean that we can take a step back and just, rest on our laurels. No, we have to continue fighting. And I think what you're doing at Current Revolt, raising up some of the more, we'll call it the TMZ stuff of politics that folks will pay attention to, right? That could help hopefully lead them to pay attention to other things. So I say all that to say, hey, I think we're taking a step in the right direction. And Tony, I dare say what you're doing down in Texas with Current Revolt is helping paint the picture of ways that we can start to get more folks to pay attention to politics as well. So with that being said, I'll turn things over to you. Bring us home. Final thoughts for today?
No, I appreciate you having me on. If you're a Texan and you're watching this, we're a must subscribe. So you can follow us at currentrevolt.com. Same on Twitter at Current Revolt. Got a YouTube page and Instagram as well. We just talk about Texas news. So if you're a Texan and you just want to pay attention to the state, we're the place to be.
There you go, man. All right. Folks, we'll include all those links in our show notes. So if you want to go ahead, check out Current Revolt, go ahead and check out Tony. You can go ahead and do that. Just click the links and they'll all be available down below. And then other than that, you can find yours truly on your favorite podcasting. I was trying to say platforms and podcasting. It came out plodcasting. So that's a new one. Podcasting platforms. You can find yours truly at B Nichols Liberty. You can find the show at YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, or you can go ahead and find the show on your favorite podcast catchers like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music. All I ask is if you are joining us for the first time, hit that subscribe button. If you have been listening to the show for a while, check and make sure you're subscribed, because sometimes you get unsubscribed. And then other than that, if you want to reach out to yours truly, email me at brian@briannicholsshow.com. Tony, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Mr. and Mrs. members of the audience, for joining us today as well. Again, if you got some value, please go ahead and share today's episode. With that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Tony Ortiz. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.